Welcome back, everybody, to the Attract and Stand Out podcast. It's Darlene Holly, and I'm so excited for today's interview. I have with me Darieth Chisolm. She is a multi-time Emmy Award-winning television personality, a filmmaker, former NBC News Anchor, national TV correspondent on Tomorrow's World Today on the Science and Discovery channels. She's also a life and business coach and an international motivational speaker. And I'm so excited to have her on today so we can talk all things business and how to get out there and really share your story. As most of you guys know, I talk a lot about storytelling in my business, and I'm so excited to hear Darieth's version of like, how do we show up? How do we share a story? Especially Darieth, knowing that you've shared so many amazing stages with filmmakers and newscasts and Emmy Award-winning televisions. I can only imagine the storytelling that you've been able to pull out and bring into your business as well. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. This is so great we get to spend this time together.
Absolutely. I'm always thrilled to make new friends and hear stories of like the journey that we're on. So many of us have found ourselves on this path to entrepreneurship, and we've come from all these different backgrounds. And I'm always super curious, like, how did you get where you are today? But before we dive too far into your story, I would love just to check in. How are things going for you? How's life?
Very good, very busy. You asked earlier where I'm from or where I'm living, Michigan, but I should have said out of a suitcase because that's probably more accurate. I spend a great deal of time traveling, even in the middle of COVID, for the various projects that I work on in television and film. But now that the world is hopefully beginning to open up and lots of events are coming up, speaking is going to start happening. So hopefully those of us who are gracing stages will find some more time on stages and inviting people back into spaces that I know we all miss,
Yeah.
gatherings, events, and things like that. So
Yeah, I love that you have been traveling because I'm in Southern California. And like I was sharing before we started, it's been quiet around here. Like we don't go very many places. Things are just slowly starting to open now. And it's funny how so many other places have been open. And I love that you've been able to travel and you've been going and doing things. And I'm so excited to start traveling and getting back out into the world. And I absolutely can't wait to be on stages, just like you shared for yourself, getting back in front of amazing entrepreneurs and people who are doing amazing things. Just it's so fun. And I can't wait till we can go to conferences and all that fun stuff, which I need to apparently go find some because you're finding some. So apparently I need to get out of my own little bubble and like start getting out into the world again.
at least start planning for those. I mean, because as I think about what the fall is going to look like, and then 2022, so many things that had been postponed last year or canceled, there'll be opportunities now for people to gather. And for those of us who are speakers or want to be speakers, it's about really now beginning to source out and find those speaking opportunities and events to attend and to give to because it's coming. I feel it, I sense it as I'm working with my clients. We're all getting ready to polish up our stories and find more ways to share it with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you said that. It made me think I just saw on I think LinkedIn this morning when I was looking through that a couple people had been like, "Hey, I just got my first invitation for like a real life in-person speaking opportunity." And I was like, "It's starting to happen. I'm starting to see the signs of it. It's pretty exciting." But I would love for you to share your story. How is it that like you've been in all these different roles in film and TV and broadcasting? How is it that you came to start your own business and get on the journey that you're on today?
Interestingly enough, I tell people I've been doing business since I was 8 years old. I had an orange juice stand in the inner city of Detroit, and I had the nerve to mix red Kool-Aid in with orange juice because all the other kids were doing lemonade, and I decided that that was going to be my thing, and we called it Bam Bam's Juicy Juice. And
I love it.
literally, we did it on off to the corner of my off Clifton Street in Detroit from my grandmother's house. But the best part about it was I figured that I could really catch the other people in the rest of the community by having other people sell Bam Bam's Juicy Juice on their corners. And so I somehow amassed a team of my friends we made the Kool-Aid at my grandmother's house. They'd have their own pictures. They'd go out. They had to pay me for the pictures first and foremost. Then they'd go out and they'd sell their own Bam Bam's Juicy Juice. This was 8 years old. So you can see that at that time I was already thinking about an entrepreneur who was trying to figure out, how to take the world over with Bam Bam's Juicy Juice. But that was 8 years old, and as I grew up and became older, I've also loved writing. I mean, I went to Wayne State University and majored in journalism, and got a very early job in television. In fact, I've been on television all my life, frankly, since the age of 18. And so storytelling has always been a powerful piece of what I've done professionally, just in the industry in television, won a couple of Emmys for them. And so it comes very natural to me. But then the other thing that I'm most passionate about is entrepreneurship. And so as I was still on television working in Dayton, Ohio, and then on to Pittsburgh, where I anchored the news for the NBC affiliate for over 20 years, I also always had businesses. I had everything from, selling paintings to vending machines to opening an aerial fitness studio. Like you name it, I felt like I did it. So entrepreneurship always coursed through my veins. But at one point, I ended up hiring a business coach to help me with one of those businesses. And I fell in love with coaching. And I realized that there was so much value in helping people to really connect with their true desires and to figure out how to not only develop a business and develop the strategy behind it, but to power what they're doing with their own story in order to inspire their audience, attract their ideal clients or customers, and then ultimately sell their solution. So for me, this has kind of been the merging of everything that I've ever done, and then taking what I know to be true in the marketplace, but then also what I know professionally, and then what I've learned as a certified life and business coach to help my clients understand just the power of connecting all of those pieces and really leading with their story. And whatever platform they choose to share it on, whether it's now virtually or on traditional stages or even in mainstream media, it still is anchored in the story and how the story connects with someone else. So it's really, that's kind of the short end of my story in terms of how I developed the business that I have and the work that I do.
Yeah, I so love it because I talk about storytelling in my business as well. For me, it was figuring out for myself early on in business that like I had to show up as myself and I needed to share like those little pieces of me that in the beginning when I started my practice, I didn't realize that my past life, my past careers and all those things were like important in what I was doing now. I almost closed the door to that chapter in my life and was like, okay, that's my past. It doesn't count anymore. Like I have to start from scratch and start over. And about 2 years into my business, I realized I wasn't showing up as me. I was putting on a mask almost, like trying to be somebody that I wasn't to show up. And I realized I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm like, all those things about my past career, they actually matter. Those are things that I can share in my story today and things that I think they're my strengths. They're the things that that I've taught myself, learned for myself, things that I was trained on in my corporate career and all those things. And when I brought those things in, it was like light bulb moment for me. I was like, I don't know why I thought those things didn't count anymore. I think because maybe for me it was like that different piece of leaving. For me, it was retail management. And I was like, okay, that's like a whole past life now. I need to like move forward and do this new thing. And it was like that aha moment for me. I was like, oh, it's so cool when you like realize like everything that happens in our lives are part of us. And that's what people really are attracted to. When we show up and just share, people are going to connect the dots. And if they'll figure out and we'll figure out if we're the right people to help each other and support each other.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is I think that most people assume that they'll say, I hear people say, Darieth, I have 99 stories. Which story do I tell or lead with? Or they'll say, the one that I have, I don't think is a significant story. And I think we all have stories, right? And we all have varying different stories that we can tell at varying different times. for those of us in business, I always suggest for people to really think about what is the story that for this particular audience connects the dots to whatever solution it is that you have for the problem that they have.
Yeah.
That's the only story at that point. You don't need to tell them about when you were, 10 years old, or how this other story in your life, while that might be extremely important and exciting, it may not be the one that you're leading with as it relates to business. And the beautiful thing about this is because we are so multifaceted and we have lots of stories that we can share, you can find multiple different places to share the stories. If we were talking about my passion project, my social justice project, 50 Shades of Silence, and the work that I do around cyberbullying and revenge porn, I've got a whole nother story for which has been featured on TEDx stages, and I wrote, produced, and directed a documentary about. That story is entirely different than the story that I would share if I were talking about business and the things that we need to do to get our businesses started. So it's really about finding that right story that is the through line to the end result that you want someone to do when they hear that particular story.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you're right. So many people come to me and they're like, okay, I have like you said, 99 stories. Which one do I pick? And sometimes it's good to brainstorm them all, get them out of our heads so that we can really figure out like what stories do I have? Like what's in here? What can I pull from? And it's good to write it all on paper. And some of those stories you'll use in blog posts when you're talking about different content, but it doesn't always have to be like the main like brand story for your business. Like you can use them. I was walking down the street last week and, a dog ran out in front of me and it triggers something, right? You can use those little stories to connect the dots with your ideal clients just as much as some of the bigger stories that really lead you to where you are today and help solve that problem for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's like finding those. And that's just it. I call them sub stories. So there's a main story, but then, a lot of us have sub stories. And then there are other stories, like you said. I mean, if you're like most of us in business are always trying to find additional content that we're generating to share in the marketplace as value, and as an opportunity for people to get to know us more, it's like, then what are those other parallel stories or anecdotes that you can bring into conversation on your platform, whether it's a blog, a vlog, a YouTube video, Facebook community, Zooms, podcasts. I think we all get connected through story, but the way we stay connected is through our stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a quote, and I always forget who I saw that shared it, but they were saying that people are 22 times more likely to remember you if you share story in your content and whatever it is that you're saying. Because we might remember the sales tip or like the value that is shared a little bit, but those things kind of go in our one ear, out the other, usually pretty quickly, unless we write it down and we like implement it right away. But stories are like the feelings and the emotion piece that connect with it. So those stories can live on a lot longer than the value and the tips that you're sharing. So
Absolutely.
I always encourage my clients to, I'm like, share one piece of story. It could be one sentence, even just one little piece of story in everything that you're sharing, because that's what's going to play to the heart and pull those emotions in.
Most definitely. And it is generally the thing, as you said, that people are going to remember you by. They may not, they're always going to remember how you made them feel. And usually our stories are connected to our feelings and our emotions. And you can get information out of stories, absolutely, but information is like that thing that comes in the head and out in the ear and out the other ear, where sometimes the stories rest in our hearts and in our souls. And that's powerful storytelling, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, what have been some of the most challenging things or obstacles that have come up as you've been on this entrepreneur journey with starting your business? Is there any specific things that kind of stopped you in your tracks or made you kind of take a second look?
Well, interestingly enough, just as I was beginning to relaunch my coaching business, was when I found myself, unfortunately, smack dab in the middle of a personal crisis, that is related to what's called revenge porn. When I had the very unfortunate experience of having a former ex-boyfriend who had been secretly taking photos and videos of me while I was asleep naked, post all of those photos all over the internet and onto a website, all in an attempt to shame and silence me because I wanted to end the relationship. And it
Wow.
did. I mean, for several months, it left me scrambling in embarrassment and shame and wishing that no one would even Google my name, because when you did, you would see these photos and videos that I didn't even know that he'd taken. It stopped me in my tracks. You asked the question with about it stopped completely, like to the point where I did not take on any more speaking gigs. I stopped taking clients. I closed the door for about 3 or 4 months and cried night after night for a few things. One, I couldn't get him to stop. He continued with the threats, but I also could not get the content taken off the internet. And I, was in a court battle for over 2 years just trying to get GoDaddy and Google to remove the content. But what emerged out of that was a couple of things. I realized that I was literally one of the first people to even experience this term called revenge porn, which is another term of cyberbullying, but that there was no one who was actively being a voice for the voiceless. And there were no laws in place to actually punish perpetrators. And so after I figured out a way to recover from all of this emotionally, was when I decided that I would be the one to use my voice and to speak out about it. And so I went public with my story and began telling people and putting it out into the media. And what I didn't realize what would happen, because I was doing that so that I could get ahead of him just in case people would see it. But what I
Yeah.
didn't realize was that it would become an international story where, you know, I ended up on Dr. Oz, the Megyn Kelly show, and multiple publications worldwide, and eventually did a TEDx talk about it that has been translated into 19 different languages. And then I ultimately filmed a documentary, not only about my story, but the stories of other victims about this. And so I took what was pain and what was a mess, and it became a message and a purpose. And in through all of that, while my business had to take a back seat, this social justice project was being birthed through me as a need, as like a valid need in the world. And really, it created for me and thousands of other people a way to acknowledge what was going on. And the website 50shadesofsilence.com was born, which is lots of different tools and resources for victims, but this social justice cause to give voice and dignity to victims of these crimes was also birthed. Ironically, because of that, and I often say this, is that, with divine assignment comes divine provision. And while I, at the time, was clueless as to whether or not I could even continue running my own business or even how I was going to launch this project, let alone direct and produce and ultimately have a film out there, every step of it was felt as if it was divinely guided and divinely provided for. And as a result of that, my business also grew. And so while I was shoveling money out, praying that things would happen on this side to really create an opportunity for people to see what's going on around this form of cyberbullying, later I also saw that my business also began to grow. And I did not know that was going to be, I literally thought I'd be stopped in my tracks and shamed forever. But I guess in all of that comes, whenever we're facing something that feels as though it's stopping us in our track, it could essentially be for you, happening for you and not to you. And that you don't have to be the victim in all of that. You can actually be victorious through that. And so that was such an experience for me that led to fighting for other people, but then also winning on a side that I had not even anticipated. And I'm really proud. I'm proud of the work that we've done. I'm proud of the advocacy pieces that we've pulled together as a part of it. And I'm also proud that I survived it and have gotten so far on the other side that it's also given me a clear way to support my clients who do want to figure out a way to share their stories or their really challenging stories, or to be a voice for something, or to use their voice for something. Because it's one thing to be able to coach about something, it's another thing to have been able to experience something and bring to that coaching dialogue and that coaching experience your own personal journey, but then the tools and the resources that you can also help a client use on their way towards speaking or using their voice or sharing their story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I can only imagine like what that was like in the beginning days, like as you were going through that experience, but to hear you share the story now, and like so many people have been impacted, like you were able to be a voice for other people and really show up in a space that others probably didn't know how to move forward either. And instead of sitting back, like you took a stand for yourself and really put yourself out there. And I've seen this happen with people too, like when we take a stance and we like let people know what's happening in the world and how we are um not going to stand for it, and just kind of get up on our soapbox a little bit and share from the heart, like, hey, this happened to me and this is how I've dealt with it and what I've done. And like you said, you've shared on TEDx stages and you've created a website, and I'm assuming people of from all different walks are able to get those tools and those resources now. How it comes back, and it's such a beautiful like wraparound hug almost, where like you don't always expect it to come back into your business and to help you move your business forward. But it's the visibility piece, it's the part of your story and getting out there and sharing those pieces. And I think it's an important piece that we forget as entrepreneurs so often, is that we can take a stance, we can let our voice be heard in lots of different areas that don't necessarily have a direct correlation with our business, but it can come back and really connect in a beautiful way, like it has for you, where it's helped grow your business as well as get your voice and your message out there into the world.
Yeah, and I did it with no intention, obviously,
Yeah,
that it
yeah,
had circled back, but it's that's why I believe that sometimes when we are being led, is to just go, right? Is to just go and to just trust the process, because we don't know what is further down the road, and especially when we're doing it in service to others. There are so many opportunities that exist beyond the initial work, that because we don't know what's ahead, that at least we've begun the journey and are available for the next experience. And that's what I think is so important, just about living life, right? Like whether we're building a business or trying to figure out what to do next, it's about just staying consistent and staying with it and never giving up. And beyond anything else, like that's always my biggest message to people, is that we all face hangups and bang-ups, and certainly in business and entrepreneurship there are lots of them. But it's truly at the end of the day about doing those things that we love, being in service, never giving up, and being available for what's next.
yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned like the being of service piece, because that's so much of what can we like, just putting ourselves out there, being generous, being a kind, nice human being. Like that's what people connect with. They don't like, we don't need to be like salesy or graspy and like, hey, here's my widget, come buy my service, like do these things. But when we just show up and we be ourselves and we be of service and we are, kind, like just being kind goes so far. And so many people forget that sometimes, especially when they're growing their business. They think they have to do all these different things. But I know for myself, just like being me and like building relationships and building connections with people, that's what's paid off, 10 times more than when I felt like I had to show up and like sell or like spam people with my services.
Yeah, yeah, the true point, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about like, what does success mean for you? When you think of success for your life and your business, what does that look like?
Pleasure, fun, challenge, enjoyment, fulfillment, opportunity, giving, sharing, being in service. It's like success, I think, is a combination of all of those things. It can certainly mean monetary wins because most of us get into business obviously to make money and to
Yeah.
be successful financially. And that goes without saying. If not, we'd be working a job, right? But it's all of those other things that, in my opinion, define success for me.
Yeah. I love how you listed it out because there's so many facets that can determine our success. It doesn't have to be just the money. Like there's so much joy and fulfillment and that you can pull from that as well. I would love to hear a little bit from you about like what's the next steps for you in your business? Like where do you see yourself in the next couple of years?
Oh, that is such a good question. Because, my business is a big part of obviously what I do, but I have so many other projects and things that I'm working on, and television shows, and a film that needs to get to distribution. And now I just became a certified health coach, so I'm very passionate about a health program that I am promoting. So there are so many things that when I used to think very linear about my business and being very focused, and I am when I'm working with my clients, really helping them to get to six figures and beyond. But outside of that work are all of these other things that encompass Darieth and the work that I do. And so, I'm cautious to say, what do I see happening in 5 years? I suspect that it will be more of the work that I'm doing with clients on helping them to really be grounded in their story and to use their stories to make money and to grow their business. That is the vehicle to which I do work. And now I have a year-long mastermind program to work with people to do that. And I do private coaching for that. So that will always be in place. But I also suspect that as I continue to do, as I said, the work around the social justice projects that I work on and the various television shows, that because I'm equally committed to those things, that I will likely have some varying degrees of versions of those things that will also be in place. I mean, the other thing too is I'm getting old. I said that the other day. I was like, I'll be 53 soon, and at this age, it's like I will probably continue working till I'm like 73, 80, maybe. I can't imagine a day of retirement, but I do think that adding more stuff is probably not what I want to do. So at this point, it's about really making sure that the things that I am doing are continue to be successful and continue to grow and expand without me necessarily adding something else to my already feel full pie.
Absolutely. And I wanted to hit on something that you said. I know a lot of my audience and people that I talk to are what I call them kind of like multi-passionate. Like they have a lot, their hand in a lot of like activities and different things, which I know you do as well. What would be like your number one tip to somebody who has a couple different things going on? They maybe have a couple different ideas and things that they're working on. How do you kind of balance? I don't like the word balance really, but how do you keep all of those different activities in harmony together and know which things to show up for which days?
That's just it, is know which things to show up for which days. That's the perfect way I would describe it. That's how I've lived my life. And I'm going to talk a little bit about being multifaceted versus being very linear and focused in a minute. But for those people who are and who have consistently been that way, that is part of your DNA. And I believe that we have somehow been under the impression that it's somehow wrong to be multi-passionate and multifaceted because the patriarchy, the masculine business structures have always said be laser focused and go get stuff done and don't do anything except for this for the next whatever, and that's fine for those people who think that way. But there's a whole cadre of other individuals who also happen to know how to juggle lots of things. In fact, they would not be happy if you made them just go in a straight direction. Really, and I'm one of them. Like I'm the chief, I'll be in the right of the front. Like, no, we're going this way today and this way tomorrow. And part of it is because I think it's just, like I said, it's a part of our DNA. And so every time we make ourselves wrong for not allowing ourselves to think and behave in ways that are very flow and very multifaceted and multi-passion, that's when we mess up. I think that's when we drop all the balls and we are standing there looking like, well, what happened? It's because someone told you you were wrong for having all of the balls. And I don't necessarily believe that there's anything wrong with that. Having said that, it is important, though, that there's structure with that. And I think part of the way that it becomes structure is, on which day you do certain things. I'm a huge believer in batching. And so on certain days, this project is focused on whatever project that next day, that's what that, and that's all you focus on that particular day. Then the next day you focus on project B, and the next day it's project C. The other thing that it's important, particularly for those of us who are multifaceted, multi-passionate, is to figure out more quickly than the others how to get team around you. You have to have other people around you helping you, because you can't do all of these things all by yourself. Yes, that's what they tell us, right? That's why they want you to go in one direction, but you can do lots of different things if you have other people helping you do those things. So, and I don't care if it's getting the kids involved or hiring a VA or hiring someone who's full-time. There has to be a way that there are other people on deck helping you with those multiple projects, or making it easier for you to focus on them by them, folks at home, doing the dishes, handling the laundry, things that would also take your time away so that you can spend the hours and the time that you have focusing in on those various different projects throughout the week, batched out on day to day. I mean, I go into this in depth. I'm a huge believer in that. One of these days I might just write a book about it. But that's some real practical advice to those of you all who have multiple interests.
Yeah. I love how you broke it down, because you're so right. Like, you can do all the things if you have a schedule set up for yourself. I think the clients that I've talked to who are multi-passionate and have a lot of different things going, they're trying to do everything every single day, and they don't make real good progress sometimes because they're trying to do 5 things in one day. Where I love how you broke it down. That's like, just take it day by day, stay focused on those different activities. And you nailed it on the head when you said, like, get support, like whether it's in your business or if it's at your household, whatever that is, like setting those boundaries and setting yourself up for success, because you don't have to do everything. I think I hear all the time, like, you can do it all, like do all the things. And I'm like, yeah, I can do all the things and I can do that, but I don't need to. And I don't really want to either. So
I think the other thing is, you also have to be really true to what brings you the most pleasure, and do those things first. Do the things that you enjoy first. And typically those of us who are very multi-passionate, but I know all of these, know that you have to prioritize those. You also have to prioritize what is most important, and income producing activities typically are the most important. So those still have to be done. You still have to do those things that bring you the most pleasure, and then you have to list them out. And then there will be some things that just won't get to, and sometimes you'll have to say, okay, then that gets delegated. This gets to go to someone else, or this has to wait. This gets to be a future project. It can't, I don't have the time or the wherewithal or the bandwidth to do it right now. So I'm going to assign this for a later date, and I'll come back to it. And for those of you know exactly who I'm talking to, if you have multiple projects and there's that one that you're like, oh my God, I want to get to it. If it brings you that much pleasure and you really want to do it and it's income producing, you might need to bring it up to the top. But some of that stuff you may have to bring down to the bottom and be very realistic. And so the difference around, again, those of us who have all of these different projects, we have to just be okay with that. And you might not get to the finish line first. That's the other thing, is that usually the thinkers that are like, no, just focus on one thing, one time, one project, don't do all of these other things, are the ones that really want to get to the finish line first. And that's great. There are people that will want to do that. That's why in any given race, there's a winner. Somebody wants to get to the finish line first. If you know in your heart of hearts that you want to have multiple things going on, then you're just not going to get there first. But you're going to get there with a big smile on your face saying, well, along the way, I did this and I saw here and I took a U-turn and I turned around and I did a backflip and I wore a colorful hat. You do all of that on your way to get to the finish line. You just won't be the first one.
And that's totally fine.
Yeah, right.
I love that you mentioned that. I always say that I have like this invisible shelf next to me, and I'm like, I'm gonna put this on the shelf for right now, and because I like come up with all these ideas all the time, and I'm like, sometimes I try to act on them, but then I don't always finish through, right? Because I have too many things going on at that moment. So I've learned for myself that I need to like take ideas in, and when I think of them, like, let's put them on the shelf. Let me sleep on it. Let me think about it for a little bit, me feel into it, and then when I'm ready, I'll just come back and pull it off the shelf. I'm like, all right, now's the right time to do this. But I love that you mentioned like the shelf idea because that's something that I do for me. Because I'm like, sometimes I'm like, okay, there's too many ideas, it's too much, I can't figure out which ones to do. So I'm like, all right, they all go on the shelf, and then they'll come off the shelf at the right time.
Yeah, I think what happens too is those of us who are multifaceted is that we are extremely creative, we are extremely connected to our creative expansion. And because of that, things flow to us very quickly. And some of us, myself included, don't necessarily have a good filter or a good way of putting stuff on the shelf. So we get it, it comes and we're like, yeah, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do that. And then, and it doesn't help that many of us also, we're like the bunnies running past and we're like, we're going and so a lot of that really you do need to temper that. You do need to bring it down because it will make it hard for you to even do the projects that you really want to right now anyway. But you knowing that and accepting it and not making yourself wrong for it is a fundamental start, because so much of society, and particularly the business leaders that are great at teaching us things, will tell us that. And there's nothing wrong with the focused person who's doing it, but that person has a different DNA than those of us who do. And so you really do need to figure out how am I programmed? And then if I'm going to not be the person who's going to go straight ahead, then I also may not be the person who's going to be crossing the finish line first. And then just don't make yourself wrong about it. And then enjoy the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't make yourself crazy. Enjoy the process. Absolutely. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I could talk to you for a lot longer, but I'm going to slow us down a little bit. I'm going to take us to our rapid fire questions that I ask all my guests each day or each week. I'm super curious. Do you have a morning routine? And if so, what is it? What does it look like?
It looks like me waking up I don't know, about 8 o'clock, 8:30. I sleep in. I do not wake up 2 o'clock. I don't even wear a watch. So I wake up and immediately I get into prayer and meditation. I usually use like high frequency music. I have a ton of it that I get off of YouTube to really kind of get myself, because I'm so auditory, kind of anchored in. I have a notebook near me, and usually what comes out first is my to-do list. So I let it come out. Like, what are all the things I think, like they just drop right onto the page. And then I set that aside, and then I intentionally slow my breathing down so that I can take the music in and just be with the thoughts of what's going to occur for the day. And set the intention for the absolute best success for whatever's on that list and or whatever's on my calendar for the day. I'm always reading something. And so the book is always next to the journal. So then I read a couple of chapters of whatever particular book that I am reading. And usually that spawns additional thoughts. So I reserve some time afterwards to make sure that I now meditate on that. I have I am statements and affirmations that I go through. My goals list for the month, I recite each day. And so that usually comes after that. And that all of that usually takes about an hour or so. And I'm very committed every morning to doing it, with the exception of when I'm traveling and I have to get out the door, do something along those lines. when I can, I'll go out and do exercise, depending on where I am, and whether it's just walking or hitting the gym, then I do that. And I typically start my day at about 11. I'm very conscious of the fact that for most people that, I know people I have so many friends that are in the 5 a.m. club, and I'm like, God bless you.
Yeah.
That's and I'm the one that's still up later because I follow my natural system, which says, we don't get up at 5, and if we do, we're going back to sleep.
Yes,
And
I'm with you.
it's just like sometimes I don't go to bed to 5, but I'm okay. I don't get to make myself wrong for sleeping the way that I want to. But I also tend to try to end my day about 6 o'clock. I'm intentional to not also drag into the evening because I enjoy the evenings where I want to have dinner or go to dinner or read a book or watch a movie or spend time with friends. So I've learned to be very proficient and efficient in that time, that window that I'm working. And the other thing is that I've gotten myself to a place where my Mondays and Fridays are very light, if at all, because I travel so much. I usually am traveling on Fridays and returning on Mondays, so I don't do much work on those days. And my Tuesdays and Thursdays are what I call out-facing days. So they're days like this where I'm, doing a podcast or coaching or doing a Facebook Live. Tuesdays are typically my team days where I'm working with my team. And then Wednesdays, I take calls. And so I'm on calls. That's usually the longest day. It's literally like I start at 10 and I may go until 7 or 8 because I stack all the calls. So I've gotten to a place where, as I said, batching is really important.
Yeah.
Working on certain projects are really important, and putting them in certain days of the week so that it works for like the structure part of that works because then I can be very fluid within the structure.
I'm smiling over here because your week is very much like mine. I schedule mine very, very close to what you just described. I'm like, yes, because when I started my business at first, like I was doing like the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and like I had it like very like schedule-y, like what corporate was like, right? And then as I felt more into it, I'm like I have CEO Monday where I do more personal development and I take care of me and I like do some of the behind the scene type stuffs. And Fridays are definitely my lightest day of the week. And then I take clients on Wednesday, Thursdays, and Tuesdays like my content creation day. So I love that you have a similar schedule, and it's just kind of in the flow of who we are, right? Like we don't have to define it any special way. Like each of us gets to pick a way that we can run our business that feels good to each of us. I think that's like the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is we don't have to fit in a box. We get to do it our way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of my next questions was going to be to ask you about what book is on your nightstand. And you kind of alluded that you do have a book on your nightstand. What are you currently reading right now?
Flowers and Honey, which is a really good book. It's not on my nightstand, it's on my Kindle. And I can't remember her. I just started reading it. I want to reach down and get the Kindle so I can tell you who the author is. I will do that since I brought it up because people might be asking about it. So I have two books. So this is on the nightstand. We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers is.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading. That's by my bathtub right now.
I love that book. So that is on my that's on my coffee table. But
it's so good. I'm in like chapter 2. I haven't gotten very far in yet, but
I just got it because I ordered it during her pre-sale. So I just started reading it too. I'm on chapter 2 too, which is great. So it's by Julie Tenner. It's called Flowers and Honey: The Art of Relationship. Hold on, just went away. Um, the Art of Relationship, of Love and Desire, and it's such a good book, especially if any of you all are curious about masculine and feminine energy, but also more so about really how to ascertain your feminine energy and not only use it in the relationships, right, that you have, your relationship with yourself and with others, but so much of this, I believe, translates into how we do business, how we show up in the world, and how we attract. And so I'm just loving this book. It's so good, and loving Rachel's book as well.
Yeah, both. I'm gonna have to check out the Flowers and Honey, and then definitely, if you're listening to this, get Rachel Rogers's We Should All Be Millionaires. It's gold. Absolutely. And then I'm always curious. Are you a binge watcher? Are you watching anything on like Netflix or TV these days or?
You know, for a woman who has spent all her life in television and like did television constantly, and still does, I used to not watch a lot of television, but thanks to COVID, me and Netflix and Amazon Prime have become huge friends. So there's a couple things I'm watching. Them, which is on Amazon Prime, In the Dark, which is on Netflix, and Hands of God, which is also on Amazon Prime.
It's an Amazon, yeah.
Yeah.
I have actually not seen any of those three yet, so I will add them to my list. I'm very much like you. Like I watch a little bit of TV here and there. Usually it's like one show right before I fall asleep, but I'm loving like watching all these little shows. I don't do a binge where I sit down and watch the whole season like in one day. Like I don't have the space or the bandwidth for that, but I'm like one episode a night of a series. It feels like my binges.
I know. I was so happy that once the restrictions let up and we could actually start getting out, I was like, okay, because I am just like because with these series, they're so good, right? And then they lead right into the next, and the next thing you know, you're like, I'm on number four, episode four. How did that happen? And then I thought I'll just start watching the movies, and I won't get hooked on the. But then the movie would be done, and I'm like, now what? So that just
Like
makes
I
sense.
want more. There's nothing worse, I think, than like really being into a show and like devouring it and loving watching it, and then all of a sudden you like go to see when the next season comes out, or if there is one, and they're like, "Oh, show was canceled," or or they decided not to make it. I just had that happen with a show I was watching. I forget what it was called now, and it was so good. It was like a really good series, and then I looked it up, and it was made like 4 or 5 years ago, and they discontinued it, and I was like, why? All the good ones.
It's like having a great tube of lipstick
Yeah,
and you run out and you can't find it.
yeah,
Burns me. But same thing, like I feel the same way. Like I'm still waiting on The Witcher, which I watched 2 years ago and they said it was coming out. And I just loved that. So
yeah, absolutely. I think the recent thing that I've been waiting to come back out was Ozark. Have you watched Ozark?
not get into Ozark. I had intended to, but I
My
did.
my husband was watching it and I got sucked in when he was watching, and they were supposed to release a new series like months ago now, and I'm like, oh, where, or not a new series, but a new season. I'm like, where is it at? What's gonna happen? But yeah, it's been fun binge watching. I think as we start to get out into the world a little bit more, a lot of us will pull back from as quite as much TV. But thank
Mhm.
goodness we had it. Could you imagine if this happened like 20 years ago and we just had like cable
Exactly.
only?
Yeah.
Um, I had two more questions for you. Who has been the biggest influence in your life? If you could name one person that's made like the biggest impact on you, who
My
would you
son.
say?
My son.
Your son?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any specific reason why or like special moment?
I mean, it's really interesting that out of the mouths of babes, like he has on several occasions in conversation with him, been the voice that I needed to hear that literally course corrected something for me. And I'm not sure how or why, because you would never expect that a child um, would be that person, but I have to say it is him. Um, and while I could name lots of other professional mentors and people in my life who have been just incredibly um, significant, I would say that it is him and our relationship.
There's nothing more special than like the people that are actually in our day-to-day lives and how they impact us, especially when they're our babies. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a mama of four, and I can like I was like, yep. I was like, as soon as you said your son, I'm like, I have three sons, and I can think of like little moments that each of them have like dropped into my things that they've said that have like I've taken to heart and to soul.
Yeah.
And my last question for you is, if you could go anywhere in the world, and you've been traveling. Usually I ask this question and I'm like, nobody's traveling and I can't actually let you go there. But where's like that one place that you like on your bucket list that you'd love to go and visit?
I got to choose one.
Just
Okay.
one.
Ooh, you know, mm, wow. That is such a great question because I have so many, and so to narrow that down to just one, I think would be unfair to all of the others but I'll do my best to try and do that. I don't know. I think there are parts of Africa that I would like to visit, and that feels there's a calling there. I'll just go ahead and keep going. Bali is like really that's next on my list. I definitely want to do that. I'd love to go to Japan. So I mean, those are countries that I feel as if they're just really calling me, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And
Yes, I snuck the others in only
you
because
get you get to sneak all the places in because why not, right? Like the world's opening back up. We're gonna start traveling. We have places to go, people to see, and it's such an like a cool experience to like to start planning those places. Like even if they're on the bucket list and you haven't gone there yet, just knowing like the culture, the food, the views, like all the pieces that different areas have to offer. It's so cool to watch.
definitely.
Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been so fun getting a chance to hear your story and connecting with you. I know people are going to be like, how do I connect with you? Where do I find you? Where do you like to send people?
You can just go right to my website at darieth.com. It's Darieth. On the website, I've got some freebies. You can watch a 5-part video series. You can see all my blogs and videos. You can learn more about 50shadesofsilence.com there, or you can go directly to the website. And then details about Tomorrow's World Today, the show that I do on the Discovery and Science Channel, is there as well. So it's that is as simple as it gets. You can schedule a free call with me there as well, and take advantage of some of my free resources and videos that I have. That I'm also on social media under Darieth Chisolm under all social media. So I'd love to connect with you.
Perfect. And I know people are definitely going to go find you. And I know you also have a free gift for everybody today. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. For those of you all who are really interested in learning a framework to really help you use your story to make income. And what I mean by that is like take the components of your story as a way that you are now driving more income, particularly to 6 figures. You might be interested in my framework, and that you can get your 5-part video series on the framework at darieth.com/framework. And I will walk you through 9 very essential steps that every 6-figure and 7-figure owner uses to inspire their audience, attract their ideal clients and customers, and ultimately sell their solution in the marketplace. So that's at darieth.com/framework.
Perfect. And I know people are going to run and grab that amazing resource. Darieth, thank you so much for being here with me today. It's been such an honor.
It's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, everybody. That's another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I will see you next week. Go out there and make it happen and have an amazing day. Bye.